God's good, isn't he? The trick to it is like we spoke about this morning, remembering how good and kind and faithful he is. Go back to Esther chapter 2 a minute. I want to refresh your memory a bit. Esther chapter 2, verse 21. What we don't know is what's happening, and lots of times it's hard to see what's happening because, again, we're not privy to the whole plan. We're very guilty at making quick judgments. We think something is good or bad or not right or whatever, and yet we haven't seen it play out. And that's a trick, right, to watch it play out. Sometimes we want to go crazy after something. We just got to let time play out. And God has a plan and a purpose. In Esther chapter 2, verse 21, it says, one day as Mordecai was on duty at the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, those people, were guards at the door of the king's private quarters. They became angry at King Xerxes and plotted to assassinate him. God always has his people at the right way in the right time. Mordecai found himself at the king's gate working, and these two guards at the door of the king's private quarters, remember that's an important, they were the real guards for the king. You can see how important that job was. They got angry and they plotted to assassinate him. That they must have got pretty angry, right? I mean, if you're going to kill him, hopefully he did. I mean, it wasn't just, you didn't feed me breakfast, right? Mordecai heard about the plot. And again, this is God, right? God allowed Mordecai to hear it. And he gave this information to Queen Esther. He could have tried to make a hero about himself. He tells Esther, and Esther tells the king about it and gave Mordecai credit for the report. Sometimes when we do things, we want to be recognized for them, right? Sometimes when we do the right thing, we think, God, where was the reward in that? Or sometimes we think that nothing happened, or nothing is happening, or God is quiet, or God is silent. Conversely, sometimes we think everything's good when it's really not. Look, it's hard to do something and not feel like you got rewarded. How many people have been upset at work because they feel like they're giving all of this effort and they're not really getting rewarded for it? Maybe in a marriage you feel like that. I'm the only one giving and no, I don't see any, whatever. We can get into all kinds of things. Mordecai, when you bless a king like this, when you serve a king like this, I mean, it was his kind of royal duty and a normal to pay back, to honor someone that would say, I mean, this is a big deal. If you save the president, if you don't, if from an I mean, we've had them all recently, right? Assassination attempts or whatever. But if you stop that at the pass, if you're the one that stops that, you would think you'd get a reward from it. Verse 23, it says, an investigation was made and Mordecai's story was found to be true. And the two men were impaled on a sharpened pole. But that's it. Nothing happens. Mordecai has saved the king and nothing happens. It's kind of like Joseph, right? Joseph's in the pit. Joseph's in the prison. It keeps like, man, what are you doing, Lord? How's he not getting recognized for this? People are forgetting Joseph. And all of this stuff is happening in Joseph's life. And you keep thinking, what's happening? What's going on? And you read the story and it all makes sense. And in the end, you know that Joseph wins. In chapter 6 and verse 1. So in chapter 2, you might think, Mordecai, what's happening to you, man? And I had questions about Mordecai and things at the start of the study, but there's a lot of amazing things about Mordecai. In chapter 6 and verse 1, it says, remember in chapter 5 at the end, we've left with the Haman's plot to kill Mordecai. His wife and his friends in verse 14 of chapter 5 suggest to set up a sharpened pole that stands 75 feet tall, and in the morning ask the king to impale Mordecai on it. Awesome. When this is done, you'll go on your merry way to the banquet with the king. Remember, why is Haman so mad at Mordecai? Because he won't worship, he won't bow down. Haman has problems. Haman is absolutely infested with pride and kind of little man syndrome and all kinds of stuff. So you fast forward, obviously it's quick to fast forward with us to flip from chapter 2 to chapter 6, but real days, real hours, real time has passed, right? And Mordecai, to his credit, doesn't seem to be bothered about it. How many of us could do something without getting credit for it? To do something so noble, so important. God's at work in all of this. He's going to save the Jews, but Mordecai has said, and Esther's given him credit, and the king hasn't done anything. And yet you don't hear that Mordecai was upset. You don't hear that Mordecai tried to fight his battles, that tried to get something. There's a humility, an amazing part of Mordecai is he doesn't fight that. I mean, if you were to be used in a great way, it's hard to stand back and not get recognition. Now, that you're not meant to get recognition, but you can see where this would be a trouble. But for Mordecai, it doesn't seem to be. But in chapter 6, there comes a night where God says, I remember. What you have to remember is God always, I told you this morning, he knows, he sees your suffering, he sees your poverty. God knows when to move. He knows exactly when to move. So when God does it, it's always perfect. His timing is impeccable. It says that night the King Xerxes, couldn't sleep. God allows it. You think about the irony of this. The guy has 1,000,000 pleasures. He has all the riches of the world. And yet the one thing he can't do is what? I mean, he should have got one of those sleep pillows or mattresses or the beds that go up and down, right? That was before his time. I mean, you think today, I mean, how crazy would that be? Like, if the president couldn't sleep, imagine all the things they would try. I mean, have the best bed, have the best pillows, take this medicine, whatever. I mean, he couldn't sleep. This night he had trouble sleeping. And again, look, this isn't just, oh, he had insomnia. God is allowing this. Can God make a pagan king not sleep? Yes. And that sounds so easy, but if God has control of a pagan's mind where they can't sleep, God just says you're not going to sleep. We have to realize how sovereign and how powerful God is. And if we believe that, then don't worry about what you're worried about. God's over all of that. Can God make someone sleep if they need to? Yeah. He put Adam into a trance. He put Abraham into a trance. He can make you sleep. He can do whatever. Anyway, the king, Xerxes, is having trouble sleeping. And this is really funny. It can't be for entertainment. He asked for the book, the Chronicles. He ordered an attendant to bring the book of the history of his reign so it could be read to him. You know what that's akin to? I need to get so bored, kind of, I just need to fall asleep. So when you need to fall asleep, you don't watch an action movie like, woo, keep your eyes wide open. An older lady one time told my dad, this was back in the day when tapes were the thing. You remember when we recorded on tapes? And if they messed up, you got the pencil and did the... this lady came up and told my dad how much he'd enjoyed his tapes. And just before he got a big head, she said, I've been really having trouble sleeping, but I put one of those on and I'm good. So I like, all right, well... I thought that was pretty funny. My dad didn't find it as funny, but I said, well... Your tapes are being used. Maybe the Lord uses many different ways, right? But he orders this book to basically help him fall asleep. I mean, these people are going to read this thing, and it's just the history of his reign. It's like the Chronicles. So it could be read to him. So the king's sleeping, couldn't sleep. He asked for the attendants to come in. Remember, the attendants are in attendance at all times of the night, all day, all whatever. So it could be read to him. Verse 2. Just so happens, right? This is how God is. God isn't allowing him to sleep. Then he decides, hey, I want you to read the Chronicles. Then they happen to read exactly what they need to read. You see, this isn't coincidence or just a lucky chain of events. God is over all of this. The king can't sleep. He asks for the book. The book gets read. And as they read it in verse 2, in those records, he discovers an account of how Mordecai had exposed the plot of those people. 2 of the eunuchs who guarded the door to the king's private quarters. We just read that in chapter 2. And he's reminded and he listens to this story about how Mordecai had exposed the plot. And all of a sudden his mind starts to race. And all of a sudden, what does he realize? We didn't do anything to what? We didn't recognize him. We didn't do anything for him. That shows you that God was over all of that too. King Xerxes had no problem honoring Mordecai. But somehow he forgot. Like, how does a guy save your life and you just don't reward him? And it's not like the king was against rewarding him. As soon as he figured it out, he wants to what? He wants to honor him. But this is all God. It's all God's timing. It's all. What I'm saying is sometimes at your work, you might say, how did I get passed over for that promotion again? How did that happen to me again? Why is no one seeing this? Why is no one understanding? This had to be my time. Whatever it is, just don't what God's got it. What you don't see in chapter 2, what you don't see is chapter 6. And God's a God who can turn everything around and who says, I know you didn't understand then, but I had to get you here. And to Mordecai's credit, he goes on with life. You don't see Mordecai complaining and screaming and like, no one see. Haman is desperate for power and authority and people to know him and see him. Mordecai, man, it's amazing. It's amazing in life if you just let God deal with it, how he'll deal with it. How many of us as Mordecai would be trying to fight our own corner? How many would be nudging our friend like, what do you have to do around here to get a favor? I mean, look at the king. We get hurt, right? And we try and manipulate the situation. Mordecai seems to have just left it. He just leaves it. He leaves it in the hand of God. And God's never like, oh, sorry, I forgot. God's known this. God's over this whole situation. And the king somehow, I don't understand that. How do you not, Esther told him it was Mordecai. Great. How do you not reward him right then? It's the way things happen, right? God's ordained all of this. And he reads this, they're reading it, he's trying to fall asleep, and all of a sudden, he thinks, in verse 3, what reward or recognition did we ever give Mordecai for this? And his attendants replied, nothing has been done for him. Nothing's been done. Sometimes you serve the Lord and it feels like that, right? Sometimes you think, if I do this, this is going to happen, or I'm trying to help, I'm trying to serve, I'm trying to do, and it seems like nothing has been done for you. Remember, this is really important. Go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 a minute. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, there's a principle. Right at the end of 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And just verse 58. We live in a very quick world, right? We want instant gratification. We want instant reward. I mean, if your boss said, don't worry, do this, and in 10 years I'll reward you. How about 10 minutes, right? 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. My dear brothers and sisters, because of the victory we have over sin and death, my dear brothers and sisters, be strong and what? Be strong and immovable. Whatever happens, whatever comes your way, be strong and immovable. Don't let the devil get you. Don't let your mind, don't let your heart, don't let your spirit be moved. Be strong and immovable. You started off loving God. You started off worshiping God. You started off following God. Don't be like the Galatians who easily got bewitched and something happened. Be strong and immovable. Don't ever worry. Don't ever get scared. Just be strong and immovable. Here it said, always. You know what always means? Always work enthusiastically for the Lord. Now think about that. Is anyone willing to say, that's me? First of all, always working is problem number one, right? It would probably be hard for any of us to say, I always am serving the Lord the way I should. Does anyone want to make that statement? Number two, not only is it just working, but it's doing it. Look at what he says, always work enthusiastically. Again, some of the stuff that will burn up. Some of the stuff that we don't understand is you can do the work. But if your mind and heart and spirit are in the wrong place, guess how much value there is in that? I picture it like someone passing those boxes and throwing the money in. Here, have it. Well, you know what your blessing for that is? Not a whole lot. Like you've given your tithe, you've given what you, but if you're doing it begrudgingly, if you're doing it like because you have to out of because someone's watching you, because someone's making you, that's not how you get blessing and reward. Paul says to always work enthusiastically. Mordecai is that kind of person at this point. Like, how do you work enthusiastically for a king that has overlooked you saving his life? Like, saving his life should be worth something. I mean, if you save your boss's life and he does nothing for you, that would mess you up a bit, right? I seen a thing on the internet yesterday. A guy had worked at 7-Eleven for 50 years, and the CEO, whatever, sent him an email and said, thank you. It's like, for 50 years? That seems a little. I mean, even the worst employer, I don't know why you'd keep him for 50 years, but I mean, he probably deserves more than a thank you, right? That's what I'm saying. Like sometimes, I mean, if that, I don't know anything about this guy, but if he was a believer, how hard would that be to serve at 7-Eleven for 50 years and not get any recognition? and seem like what you're doing isn't working. Now, you're not meant to do it for the recognition. That's not what I'm saying. But it's hard to work for 50 years and not seem to be getting anywhere and not have anybody notice that you're even trying or doing something. Paul says, do it enthusiastically for who? Not for yourself, not for your family, not for the Lord. Do it for the Lord. You're serving the. And when we understand we're serving the Lord, and if you think you're serving people, your service will go up and down. Because people will let you down, you'll get mad at them, and then you won't want to serve them. You're serving the Lord. And he says, always work enthusiastically. And here's the kicker. Here's what you have to understand. For you know that nothing, you know what nothing is, that nothing you do for the Lord. Now, he doesn't say stuff you do for yourself. He doesn't say stuff you do for your ego. That is useless. That'll burn up. But everything you truly do for the Lord is what? Is never useless. That might sound obvious, but you've been in situations where you think it's useless. Maybe you've given something and it doesn't seem to have done anything. But the Bible promises you that you are to work enthusiastically for the Lord. And Paul says, because you know that nothing you do for the Lord is ever useless. Why? Because he always sees, he always knows, he always rewards, he always moves. Put yourself in Mordecai's position. I've stopped an assassination attempt. I'm not sure how long we've progressed in the years-wise. But nothing has been done, no recognition. And Mordecai simply goes back, and we'll see tonight, even after he gets lauded, he goes back to work. He goes back to the city gate. He goes back to normal. I just want you to think as a moment, as Mordecai, how difficult that would be. Could you do that? Could you have nothing said, nothing done? And the only way to victory over that is to know that the Lord sees. And what we have to understand, that him seeing it and him being over it is much more important than other people seeing it. Sometimes we want to tell people what we've done. Sometimes we want to manipulate the situation. But man, I've seen it so many times in my ministry. If I'll just let it go, the Lord will take care of it. The Lord just takes care of it. He just does. And now it may be in a weird way. It may be longer. It may not be whatever. But man, the Lord will take care of you. Mordecai has done this amazing deed. And nothing seems to be done until one night God's ready to move. And he moves because the king can't sleep. Go back to Esther chapter 6. And so here's this moment in verse 3. What reward or recognition? He doesn't say, should we give a reward or recognition? It's absolutely what? Essential. I mean, there's a reward and recognition coming. Did we ever give him anything? And they said, nothing has been done for him. Again, the only way to overcome that is what Paul's taught us. Verse 4. It's interesting here whether this is in the middle of the night or early morning. But God has also caused someone else not to sleep. And it's Haman. Now, the king is sleeping. He can't sleep. And then he realizes he's made a faux pas. Why is Haman not sleeping? Haman is not sleeping because he's giddy. Haman is your excited little kid on Christmas Eve. I never had as much trouble sleeping as I did on Christmas Eve, right? Go back to bed. Why? It's 2. Can't we open presents? What time is it? 3. Go back to bed. What time is it? 3:20. All right. Haman is giddy with excitement because he believes today is the day he's going to what? Yeah. He's going to kill Mordecai. He's going to show everyone you don't mess with me, and he's going to become the man again. There's one person won't bow to him, and it's Mordecai, which is to Mordecai's credit. And I think it's kind of before dawn even, but some people think it's dawn. Whatever it is, the point is the king can't sleep, and right at the same bit, now think about it, Haman's got up out of bed, he's got dressed, and he happens just to be in the courtyard at just the right time. This is how God works. If God can get Haman up out of bed, dressed, and to the millisecond in the right place, again, what are we worried about? This isn't just good luck. This isn't just fortunate timing. God has brought this together. So look what happens. The king is like, okay, we got to do something. Verse 4, who's that in the outer court? the king inquired. And then the Bible says this, and I love it when it says this, as it happened. As it happened. You know what that means? God's going to do something amazing. Watch it. When it says as it happened, that means God is sovereign and he's about to show you something. As it happened, Jesus just happened to be at the well with the Samaritan woman. No, it's not just as it happened. The Bible says something like as it happened, he was passing through. Well, you should see as it happened, Haman had just arrived. Oh, that's just good luck. Haman had got out of bed and he had just arrived in the outer court of the palace. And look what he wanted to do. Look what he was going to ask the king. Now remember, the king's already made some mistakes. He got rid of Vashti really easily. He's put into effect this genocide against the Jews. He's done kind of rash things. And he says, Haman came to the inner court to ask the king to impale Mordecai on the pole he had prepared. Mordecai doesn't seem to be scared. Mordecai knows he's not bowing. Mordecai is a really interesting character in these chapters. He doesn't seem to care about the reward, and he doesn't seem to care about Haman's power. And Haman, some of us would be bothered about Haman, right? Like, maybe I should bow to him because he's going to take my head off. Mordecai is not like that. And so the attendants replied to the king, Haman is out in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. Verse 6, so Haman came in, and everything starts to change. Here's what I'll tell you. There'll be a moment when you're struggling, when you're searching for an answer, when you don't understand, when life is really difficult, when it seems like it's wrong, when it seems like there's been no intervention. Sometimes when God is silent, he's working the most. But there'll be a moment, there'll be this aha moment that God was there the whole time. And what I keep trying to emphasize is that's going to happen. But what you want to make it happen is you want it to come whilst being still full of peace and joy and saying, I knew you were going to take care of it. See, if Mordecai had got mad, if Mordecai had got insulted, if Mordecai had said, you owe me, it would have messed him up. But somehow Mordecai still serves the king. Now, if he can serve King Xerxes when it's hard, we should be able to serve Jesus when it's hard, right? What I'm telling you is there's a time where God makes it understandable. You'll look back and see, oh, that was what that was about. Maybe not in full. But you can look back in your life and those things you worried about 20 years ago, you no longer worry about them. You know why? Because God took care of it. Now, some things he still hasn't taken care of. Some things take a long time. But God takes care of it. And what you want to do when God takes care of it is not say, I'm sorry. I've lost my mind. I was fearful. I was worried. I've tried to manipulate. I have been miserable for months, for days, for years, because I was so gung-ho on getting this answer. What you want to do is, Lord, it took longer than I thought, but I knew you'd come up. I knew you may not like when he shows up, but he'll show up perfectly. He'll do his own thing. Look at what it says. So Haman comes in, and bring him in, the king orders. Verse 6, so Haman came in. What is Haman thinking? Ooh. What the devil means for harm, God turns out for good, right? It's amazing. And this is a picture, by the way. Who do you think is controlling Haman? Ultimately, it's the devil. And the devil thinks what? The devil's a pretty slow learner. He's tried to wipe out the Jews. He's still trying it. He'll try it in the end. He's always tried it. And guess what? It never works. It cannot. Listen, if Israel is finally destroyed and there's no Israel, we're all done. It's the promise of God. The promise of God, remember, if you mess with Israel, God will not bless you. You'll be in trouble. If you bless them, he'll bless you. If you curse them, guess what? That's not got an expiry date on it. Moses had to deal with it. Remember the Hebrew midwives? Herod tried it in Jesus' day. Hitler tried it. Antichrist will try it. Look, the reason the devil wants to get rid of Israel is because if you get rid of Israel, you get rid of everything. Because it's a promise of God. It's kind of like if you fully destroy the church, you've got rid of everything. Because Jesus promised the gates of hell shall never what? And if they do prevail, then the whole thing's gone. So there's a lot going on here. There's a lot up for grabs. And this is just a perfect picture of the devil playing this chess game. I always refer to it like that. It's the way I like to think about it. It's this chess game. And sometimes you can look at the board and you think, oh man, the devil's winning. We're in trouble here. That doesn't look good and that doesn't look good. And we've lost some pieces and we're all over. And just when you're ready to quit, just when you're like, there's no move. There's nothing, we can't win this game. Jesus likes to show up and make a move that you didn't think of, that you couldn't see. And he just simply says, checkmate. And everyone's like, huh, you beat me again. And instead of saying, I can't beat you, what does the devil do? Tries it again and again and again. And you can see the devil like, ooh, Haman, we're going to do something here, buddy. And he got him into the king's palace. And look, and Haman has got the promotion. Everything looked just like Antichrist. For 3.5 years, especially at the end, it's going to look like he's winning. It's going to look like he's won. If you didn't understand the Bible, you would swear that Jesus is defeated. But after 3.5 years, exactly, he'll come in in the end, and he'll win. After the first 3.5 years, the second 3.5 years, he'll defeat him. And by the way, when you read Revelation, it's political and religious Babylon, it goes like that. There's going to be a day where God just steps in and all the economics fall. I mean, it'll be like that. Like all of a sudden the economy was booming, Antichrist is awesome, and the economy is going to fall dead and it's going to be over. Like that. Like that. Quick. I mean, one day they're going to be celebrating Antichrist and the next it's going to be all over. That quick. It's the way it always is. And God's already predicted it. He's like, yeah, you can win for a little bit, but after 7 years exactly, I'm going to move. And when I move, you're done. So instead of trying to figure everything out, we just need to trust that the Lord's going to say checkmate at some point. That he knows what to move and how to move. Haman comes in. Do you think it's any coincidence that the king says things? I think God's controlling the king's mouth. The king looks at Haman and he says, what should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? Oh man, his pride goes. You know how you get the flesh all riled up? You just give it some pride. And Haman is so self-absorbed, so out of it, so like obsessed. He believes the king is just calling him to say, I honor you. That's what he really believes. That's what some people think life is about. We have to honor them. He says, what should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me? So Mordecai has truly pleased him. Obviously he has, because he saved his life. Continue. Haman thought to himself, whom would the king wish to honor more than me? Well, I got one answer, or at least one person, right? Do you see how we can get there? We laugh at Haman, but our pride can make us that, right? I heard this, if you don't like this joke, it's not my joke, but I just listened to a sermon on Esther, and he told this joke. He said this lady walked in, and she sat in front of the pastor, and she said, I have to confess a sin. He's like, what's that? She's like, I'm really prideful. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, well, I've just sat for hours and hours today looking in the mirror, and I just looking at all my beauty, and I just got proud. He said, it's not proud, it's an illusion. But sometimes we want to be the center of everything, right? We want to, life's not about us. I mean, you tell your kids that sometimes, right? It's not always all about you. We have to be reminded about that, and we struggle with that, but man, Haman thinks it's all about him. Who would the king wish to honor more than me? Man, that's really full of yourself, isn't it? Look at Esther 6, verse 7. He replied, if the king wishes to honor someone. So now what he's doing is he's pushing his own agenda whilst killing himself. He's pushing his own agenda. He's pushing what his own manipulation. You'll know by now that trying to manipulate the Lord doesn't work. Trying to do your own thing doesn't work. Just stand back and let God fight your battles. I don't know how many times I've had to learn that, but it's amazing when you can just step back and let God. Have you ever said to yourself, this is going to happen, and it never does happen, but you're convinced it's going to happen. You think you know. Look at what it says. If the king wishes to honor someone, now remember, he's saying this. Why? He's saying this because he wants this. He thinks he's up for it. He should bring out one of the king's own royal robes. You can see what really, really matters something to Haman. He should bring out one of the king's own royal robes. Oh, that's life, right? That's life, to have the king's royal robe. Why would he want the king's royal robes? Because that makes you what? Yeah, it makes you look like a king. It makes you feel like a king. It gets you notice. You know what our robes are like, right? Our righteousness is like filthy rags, but we get Jesus' robes. We get the robes of righteousness. That's a whole nother thing. But he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden. Like, think about this. Haman is driving himself crazy. He's going through all of this anguish. He's got all of this stuff going on. He's built this pole to impale Mordecai on. And the height of his life, like the be-all and end-all to his life at the moment, is wearing royal robes and riding a horse that the king himself has ridden. Like, that's what Haman wants. If you asked Haman, what do you desire? That's it. That's pretty sad, isn't it? You see, but without God, without Jesus, without the Spirit, what do you have to look forward to? What is the height of life? Like, again, this is not our life. This is not our home. There's much more to come. But without Jesus this side, what is it that you want? Like, if you had a genie in the bottle with no Jesus, what are you asking for? All the money in the world? Notoriety? What? There's nothing. Do you see that the world, you know what this is going to mean to Mordecai? Nothing. Because worldly riches, worldly fame, worldly stuff shouldn't mean what? Shouldn't mean the same to us. It shouldn't mean anything to us. If we're out for acclaim, if we're out for worldly stuff, we're entirely messed up. Like Mordecai, Haman's biggest dream is to be somebody. Man, isn't that all over the world? I just want to be somebody. I want someone to recognize me. I want to make money. I want to be here. Athletes, presidents, you name it. They're all out to make a name for who? Let the robes, let's ride a horse the king himself has ridden, one with a royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. And let him see that the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robe and led through the city square on a king's horse. You see what Haman wants. He wants the whole world to stop and everybody just to watch who? Him. You know how many people care about Haman? Not a whole lot. Yeah, well, intensely one, yes. Maybe his wife cared for him a bit. But imagine living for yourself like that. Imagine this is, and by the way, how fleeting is that? Haman is willing to kill someone to get something like this. If you ever watch those murder mystery things, the Dateline or whatever, people do some crazy stuff. For money, for revenge. You see, this is the flesh, this is the world, this is natural to us. We all understand this because we're all prone to do that. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the God I trust. We're prone to that. We're prone to want life to be about us. We're prone to want a praise. We're prone to want the acclaim. We want people to think good of us. We want people to think we're something. We want people to admire us. We want people to respect us. We want people to honor us. And yet at the end of the day, we have to be willing to be seen as peasants, to be seen as beggars, to be seen as worthless, because all we are wanting is to honor who? Is to honor Jesus. And sometimes poverty and suffering and strife is the way we honor him. You see, this is absolutely counter gospel. You can't be Haman and have Jesus. You can't say, I want to be honored. I want to be seen. I want to be respected. You know who had that exact mindset? The Pharisees. And that's why they didn't want Jesus. You know what the Pharisees wanted? The same treatment. The Pharisees wanted the horse. They wanted the people. They wanted the... You imagine how hard it was. And this is why people struggle. This is why pride and things get in the way. You imagine how hard it was for the Pharisees. The Pharisees had everything they wanted till what? Think about it. The Pharisees had everything. What did they have? What did they have before Jesus showed up? Honor, control. Oh, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? Knowledge. Yeah, they thought they were wise. Everyone. Who did the people run to? Who did the people ask questions of? Who was the main man? Ooh, look at you. Listen, we live in a church age with celebrity pastors, and I'm telling you, no one can handle that. That's why these guys are falling. Because if you tell them for so long they're the man and they're untouchable, they start to believe it. There's people falling all over the place, well-known people. And I keep thinking, Lord, maybe it's good that I get 4 YouTube views, all right? I told you before, Landry loves to point that out. I love Landry. It's great. Hey, Dad, you got 3 views. Thanks, Landry. That's great. That was 4 years ago. All right. yeah, 1 a year. And then you click on the thing, and it's like average time watched 2 minutes. I'm like, I know I preach more than 2 minutes. What are we doing? Like, you're turning it off. Anyway, that's a sidebar. I don't even know what I was saying now. But we struggle with this notion. And you know what? The Pharisees, they had all of that until Jesus came. You know what Jesus said? Humble yourself. Love your enemy. Man. And you know how hard it is to be the man when Jesus is around? When Jesus walks in, it's like, can you imagine Jesus walking in and someone like, hey, can I talk to you? No chance. I mean, if Jesus walks in, you think I'm still preaching? The Pharisees were just like this, and Haman wants all this. And look, this is really sad. He thinks this was what life is all about. I just want to be the king for a moment. I just want to be honored. Let him be dressed in the king's robe and led through the city square in the king's horse. Man, that would make, the world thinks that, right? If I could just have this, I'll make it. I'll give up everything just for this. There was a thing a while ago that I read on the internet about what would you do for $1 million or $2 million. People would like, I'd kill my family for $2 million. I mean, you can't make that up. I mean, the amount of stuff, I'd leave my kids, I'd leave my wife, I'd do whatever, I'd kill people. I mean, just for millions. People are nuts. But look at what it says. Lead them through the city square in the king's horse. We've got to realize it's not about us, and God will take care of it. And Lord, it's you. I don't have to fight this. I don't have to fight this. We're going to get mistreated. We're going to get messed up. But the Lord has a way of taking care of it. Especially, I see it all the time at funerals. Like, families get so messed up over inheritance. There's so many arguments about inheritance. You know what I'd advise you to do? Forget it. Don't get involved and let God just take care of it. You'll get more from the Lord than you are. People are, I want this, I want that. Just tell them you don't want it. And you know what? They'll be like, what do you mean? Well, just because God can take care of that. And you know, I mean, I've done funerals where people they can't even speak because somebody got in Texas, maybe it's more important, someone got the gun. And because someone got the gun, the other guy was under a tree, like in a bad mood, wouldn't come with the family to the casket. They were just over there because he didn't get the gun. Like sometimes if you just let it go, the Lord will do more than you can try and fight for. I don't want to get run over. Well, I don't either, but sometimes you just let them do it and God will pay you back. If he wants you to have something, guess what? Look at what it says. Have him lead through the city square in the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go. This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor. And verse 10, excellent. Oh, and Haman is ready. Woohoo, where's the robes at? The devil's just like that, right? Oh, we got them. Ooh. No, you don't. The king said to Haman, excellent, quick. Ooh. Take the robes of my horse. Yep. And do just as you said. Yep. Ooh. You can almost see he's like smiling. He's excited. You ever had this moment where things change, like you were so excited and bam, reality hits? It's like you think you've got somewhere and then you realize, oh man, I don't. Look at what it says. Go get the robes of my horse and do just as you said for Mordecai the Jew. Oh man. You see, God can do stuff that absolutely destroys the devil, destroys the enemy. This is awesome. See, and Mordecai hasn't fought. This is what I'm telling you. This is the inheritance. He didn't fight. But God has fought for him. Mordecai, you think Mordecai could have set this up? Mordecai gets to see the hand of God. And you know what's awesome about seeing God is when he's like, I got you. I think I've told you this before. You know what's really, really imperative? You know when you have struggles with people or struggle with issues or whatever, you know the only thing that really matters is that you really can understand and believe that the Lord's on your side. Nothing else matters. Like if you go to bed and you doubt whose side God is on, that's a problem. If I can go to bed knowing that I followed the biblical principle, if I know that God's on my side, that's all I need to worry about. Like how he sorts it out, when he sorts it out, what they say, what they do, none of that matters. But I'm telling you, if there's situations where you don't know what to do or you don't know he's on your side, you better make sure you know whose side he's on. There are times where you know, look, is there any way God can be for Haman? No. If you know God, there's no way God can endorse Haman. Sometimes people come against you. There's no way God can endorse that. So don't believe that he is. There's no way God can bless that. And see, for a while it looked, there's that old adage, well, they're not paying for it. Oh, wait. They will. They will. It's never how it seems. And the trick of the devil is to say, see, look, they're doing the wrong thing and they're getting what? They're getting blessed. They're getting something out of it. So you, therefore, must do the wrong thing. But doing the wrong thing has never paid off. Never once. And you imagine Haman, as he hears the word, go and do it for Mordecai. Now listen, the Bible says, if you humble yourself, God will exalt you at the right time. And all of a sudden, Mordecai gets this ride. Look at what it says. Go and do it for Mordecai, who sits at the gate of the palace. Notice what he says. Mordecai is the guy who is faithfully to do what? What's his job? To sit at the gate of the palace. That's important. We'll come back to that in a minute. Leave out nothing you have what? Now, why does God allow the king to say that? Because he's liable just to, here, you can have this little pony I found, right? Leave out nothing you've suggested. Verse 11, if you ever have a picture of the world getting defeated, the devil losing. I mean, Haman took and here's the thing, Haman has to what? He has to do it. He's got two options. Do this or what? Yeah, or die. Well, he's going to die anyway, but he doesn't know that. Haman took How mad is Haman? I mean, if Haman was mad before, his madness now is off the charts. If he hated Jewish people before, you see, when God steps in, the world will hate you more. When God defends you, the world will hate you more. They don't like lessen off and be like, ooh. Haman took the robes, he put them on Mordecai. Now again, Mordecai hasn't asked for what? He hasn't asked for it. And yet God gives him it. He placed him on the king's own horse and he led him through the city square, shouting, this is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor. How do you think by the way, as hard as it's been to not bow to Haman, and as much trouble, whatever he's gone through, do you think Mordecai realized this was God? Do you think Mordecai sat on that horse and thought, I've done this myself? You think Mordecai was like, God is bigger and greater, isn't he? I mean, the excitement level of listen, I don't think, and I'll try and prove it in a minute, I don't think Mordecai is that bothered about the stuff. But his excitement level is through the roof. Why? What is Mordecai excited about that day? What is thrilling his heart? That he serves a God who what? Who sees, who understands, who hears, who rewards, who's got your back. See, sometimes, look, what God wants to do, yes, he gave them the horse and he gave them the city thing and the robes. But that's not what God wants you to get enticed by. God doesn't give you cash so you can, I got cash. God doesn't give you like physical blessings so you, God gives you things like this so that you can stand back in awe of who he is. And what God is doing through the gifting of these gifts is telling Mordecai, I always knew. I didn't forget. I didn't have to read the history books. I never forgot about you, Mordecai. Never. And God will never forget about you. God isn't late. God isn't like, he'll never forget about you. Everything you give, every single thing you give for the cause of the gospel will be recognized and rewarded. Every single thing. Some of it will be eternal. And by the way, if you're impatient, eternal gifts are better than these gifts here. So, and by the way, look who's doing all the shouting? Haman is. This is brilliant. Only God could set this up. This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor. Verse 12. Here's what I find really interesting that the man I was listening to pointed out, and I think it's awesome. What does verse 12 say? Why is that important? Why is that important? Okay, let's put it this way. Let's imagine you're in an office, right? And you have one of the lowest jobs. And you're just stuck in the corner with no recognition. Nobody even knows your name, really. And for a day, you get employee of the day. Woo! You're taken out for lunch. You're given the big boy desk. You're treated to the whatever your boss can give you, he gives you that day. What's hard about that? And if you know how the other half live, what would you fight to get? You see, he's been at the city gate, but now he's perceivably got in a day everything everything that the king could offer you, apart from the kingship, he's given to him. Most people would say, what? Most people, it would incite their flesh to what? I'm going to do everything I can to get that. The problem is until God, and God's going to give it to him actually, but you know what? The only way to get it now is to kill Haman. The only way Mordecai can get that at that moment is to kill Haman. And if he kills Haman, then God can't bless that. But what I'm telling you is sometimes God will honor us for a season, or sometimes God will do something, but you know what he expects? Don't get wrapped up in that. Don't get all hyped up. Just go back and do what? Just go back to serving me. And Mordecai goes back to the palace gate. And you know what you don't read? He was bummed out. He was ticked off. He never wanted to work there again. He just returned to the palace gate, and somehow Mordecai lived his life where that thing didn't bother him at all. Mordecai got it for a minute, and you know what? You know what that proved? You know what that proved to God? That you're ready to. He's going to get that very promotion. Mordecai is going to be second in command. And you know, at the moments like this, you know what it proves? You're ready. Because if you got all wrapped up in the horse and the tomfoolery and you wanted the praise of people, God, see, what Mordecai is proving is that the gold hasn't got much dross on it. That God has removed a ton. It's amazing. And he just returns. What does it say about Haman? He hurried home. Why is he hurrying? He's hurried from home because he's so excited. Today's the day. He hurries home. You see, it's weird, right? Sometimes you leave home excited, and sometimes you leave home because you're so what? You're so depressed, so embarrassed, so messed up, you just want to go where? And he runs home. He runs home. Completely what? Dejected and completely humiliated. Haman is at the palace gate. Mordecai is at the palace gate. Haman hurries home, dejected, completely humiliated. See, sometimes we want to humiliate people. Sometimes we think we're God's agents. Remember what God says, vengeance is whose? Sometimes people do us wrong and we set out to do them wrong. Like, if someone does you wrong and you do them wrong back, you're just as bad. Like, sometimes you have to fight that. Sometimes people hurt you so bad that you find yourself doing things you're like, man, now I'm just reacting to that. Look at what it says. Verse 13. When Haman, remember what did his wife and his friends say last time? Look at verse 14 of chapter 5. Haman's wife Zeresh and all his friends suggested set up a sharpened pole that stands 75 feet tall, and in the morning ask the king to impale Mordecai on it. Then when it's done, go on your merry way to the banquet. So it pleased Haman. So they've been the ones who what? They're the ones who encouraged him. They're the ones telling him, hey, set up a pole. And he's like, great idea. But again, look, this is a picture of the world. Like, I think sometimes we've been saved so long that we forget what it's like to have no hope. Like, Haman pictures that there's nothing really this world offers. If riding a horse for a day and getting honor for a day is everything, that's sad. And not only is it sad, but look, who does Haman have to go to? He has to go to people who don't know God, who don't have God, and he says, he told his wife and all his friends what had happened. How humiliating is that? You see, God is very good at extracting what you shouldn't have, pride and all that. His wise advice, check this out, his wise advisors had told him what? Set up the pole. Since Mordecai, but then look, this is what's amazing. Can God give absolute wisdom to lost people without them even realizing? Yeah. Look at what it says. Mordecai, this man who has humiliated you. Hold on, what has Mordecai done? Nothing. God has humiliated him. God has worked on Mordecai's behalf. You see, we sometimes think it's our job to humiliate people. It's not. And look what the pagans understand. The world knows more than they let on sometimes, but this is God. He is of Jewish birth. And because he's a Jew, what do they figure out? You will never succeed in your plans against him. Look at what they figured out. He's Jewish, isn't he? Yep. You'll never succeed in your plans against him. Listen to what they tell him. It will be what? It doesn't say dangerous. It doesn't say a bad idea. It says what? Fatal. It will be fatal to continue opposing him. I'm telling you, the same is true for Israel today. It will be fatal to oppose them. It will be fatal to oppose God. We should look at that and say, if you mess with God, if you mess with his church, if you mess with his people, if you mess with Israel, guess what? It's going to be fatal. It's going to be fatal. And God will absolutely humiliate the enemy. And his wife and his friends say, he's of Jewish birth. You will never succeed in your plans against him. It will be fatal to continue opposing him. And verse 14, while they were still talking, it's been quite the day, hasn't it? Haman had started with such vigor and such excitement, and now his wife's like, if you continue to oppose Mordecai, it will be fatal. Little does anybody know that it's already what? It's already been fatal. While they were still talking, the king's eunuchs arrived and quickly took Haman to the banquet Esther had prepared. And at that banquet, he's going to be dead. It's amazing what God does. It's amazing how he takes care of stuff. You don't have to fight your battles. You just leave it to the Lord and the Lord will take care of it. I love this story because Haman could literally say, what did Haman do? I mean, not Haman, Mordecai. I keep getting them mixed up. What did Mordecai do? He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. But God took care of everything for him. And 2 was a time from 6. And by the end, you'll see that Mordecai is promoted and great things happen. But sometimes, see, in chapter 2, it didn't look very good, right? It looked like God was asleep, that God was had forgotten him. But as you read through Esther, you keep thinking, you know all the time, didn't you? And he sure does. Does anyone have any questions, thoughts before we pray?